Hey, what's going on, everybody? My name is Lou, and I want to dispel some of the mysteries of mastering engineers right here and now. Now, if you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel, feel free to actually follow. I put up videos all the time on very many different things, from free vocal templates and how to actually break them down and use them, to just general information like a proper understanding over compression, for instance. But today we're going to go ahead and focus on mastering. Now, there's always going to be confusion around what mastering versus mix bus processing is, and we're not going to dive into an extreme amount of detail today. I want to make this video fairly quick so everybody can just get the information that they're looking for, so that when they're considering when to hire a mastering engineer, they kind of have some of these little misunderstandings out of the way. Let's jump in with the first one. Mastering engineers just make things loud. You know what? I'm not going to argue that. To be honest, it's not entirely wrong. It's not entirely wrong, but it's also very wrong at the same time. It's one of the most confusing statements that I hear all the time because, you know, 9 times out of 10, when you get a call saying, hey, I need this album mastered and everything, yeah, they would love for it to actually meet loudness standards. So part of our job is to make things loud. Now, part of the reason that this is such a common statement is because a mastering engineer should know when the mix is fine and will translate on other mediums. And that's the goal with this whole loudness thing, right? A good mastering engineer knows when not to change something. But most times people think of mastering as an ultimate change to your mix. Now, unless you request that, most mastering engineers will just make minimalistic changes that will otherwise improve the mix to a point where it's like, okay, not only does it translate, but there's a little more depth. There was a little bit of masking going on. We took care of this, but we ultimately preserved your mix. It's the same mix. If you give us a bad mix, it's just a louder version, maybe possibly a little bit cleaner of that bad mix. Mastering will not save your mix, but mastering can help with taking it to the next level or reach certain standards that you maybe had trouble with. So, once again, do mastering engineers just make things loud? Sometimes it can feel like that. I'm not going to argue it. Now, another concern that I hear all the time is that mastering engineers change too much. And that when they're hiring, for instance, I'll get a call and be like, I don't really want you to change anything. You know, I've sent songs out to mastering engineers who just changed it too much. And yeah, that actually can happen sometimes if it's not communicated, because you're probably dealing with somebody who actually hasn't done mastering for very long or understands what the role of the mastering engineer really is. Now, part of the reason that you could have mixes changed is that the mix will not translate on certain mediums. For instance, let's take Kendrick Lamar's Damn project into context. The low end is massive. But if you notice, it's not very, very subby. There is subs, but it's not all subs and no grit. The grit is what's helping it actually translate, and that was done in the mix. Now, let's say that it was just all subs and no grit. It'd be really hard to translate that on, like, let's say small phone speakers or small computer speakers, a laptop, things of that nature. So sometimes it's finding ways to actually shift the frequencies around so that it translates better. Now, mastering engineers many times over can be seen more as quality control. If the mixing engineer did a good job on their work and everything, maybe some touch-ups are necessary, but that's the most, really. We're not really supposed to be doing too much. It's just quality control at the end of the day. Honestly, a skilled and knowledgeable mastering engineer knows when to make certain changes and how far to push them before making certain communications happen to where you need to send the mix back. But if your mastering engineer is making a lot of changes and not communicating them, you're just getting the file back and be like, here you go, it's mastered. Chances are they haven't been around for a long time, or they're just not trying to, you know, communicate as much as they think they need to. And that's totally on them and fine for their workflow. If it works for them, so be it. But in my experience, most times, if you're going to make a lot of changes to the master, or your mastering engineer is doing that, it's better to just communicate it back to the mixing engineer. Let them make some revisions instead of you trying to super alter a 2-track, because there's a lot more flexibility and ability to get a clean alteration through the mix than it is through the master. So mastering engineers changing a lot in the master, typically kind of a day one mistake for a lot of mastering engineers. Don't worry about that when hiring an experienced mastering engineer. Okay, so this is one that I definitely wanted to actually take a moment for. I was once told that breaking up the video with a little interjection saying to remind you to subscribe to the YouTube channel was a good idea. I hope it worked. Is mix bus processing mastering? Is putting plugins on your master bus mastering? Honestly, it goes both ways. I hate to admit it, but it goes both ways. So, some mixers are actually good at making sure their mixes translate and at checking everything, and then they actually make final adjustments on their master bus. And some mixers do just completely tonal changes to their mixes with the master bus. They might add a little more compression to kind of get it a little bit louder and this and that. And yeah, that is true, but it all comes down to intention behind its use and processing. For instance, if you use something like, a Studer A800 plugin from Universal Audio on the master bus, you might do that to actually give a nice tonal shift, but does that really count as mastering? If it helps you translate on a medium that it in the past did not translate as well on, and it still keeps the integrity of the mix and everything, you could look at that as a form of mastering. Remember, mastering is all about translation, and we're going to get to that in a little bit. But mix bus processing can only really be seen as mastering if it's used with the intention of translation and final output to other mediums and making sure that it's consistent across the board. Because mastering actually goes a lot further than just a single, and we'll get to that. But mix bus processing, to be honest, 9 times out of 10, no, it's not mastering. But once again, that 1 out of 10, it's because of the intention of what you're doing. So if you're a mixer that actually puts mix bus processing on it, I'm not saying that you didn't master your song. I'm just saying chances are it was more for a creative end result than it was for a technical end result. Mastering is not very creative. It's more technical than it is any. But let's get to the next one. So this one's kind of a fun one. There's always been a question if stem mastering is even necessary, and in what sense is this even, like, why? Why not just send the alternate versions and blah, blah, blah to the mastering engineer and have them just master those alternates? To put it simply, no, stem mastering is not mixing for bitches. It's definitely not. Stem mastering a lot of times is because you're looking for more than just the placement of the song on your Spotify, but rather for TV sync and all that kind of stuff. And you want to make sure that all those stems are actually lined up, and when they play back next to each other, they should sound like the actual master recording. Sometimes there may be a little bit of finessing to one stem or the other to make sure that there's nothing clashing with them, and that will actually end result in a nicer master sometimes, sure. But a lot of times you can actually create multiple things with these. Let's just give the example of a drum bus, a bass bus, a music bus, and a vocal bus. We can create the acapella, we can create the instrumental, we can create the performance version, and, amongst other things. But these stems are usually requested when placing a song for like sync, commercials, things of that nature. You ever listen to a commercial and notice that there's a very familiar song and then the vocals bleed in after the narrator stops talking? A lot of times it's because they want these stems, and they want the stems to sound exactly like the master. So stem mastering is, once again, more for a translation once the stems are playing back next to each other. No, you're not remixing the song, and your mastering engineer should not be remixing the song with those stems. I've heard about mastering engineers, asking for specific files because they think they can blend it better. And you know what? Everybody's entitled to their own opinion. Everybody thinks they can do everything better, and that's totally fine. But let's be honest. Stem mastering is not for you to remix the song. No, it's so that you can create all the alternate files. You can get all of your delivery files ready and prepped so that if you do place the song, you don't have to go scavenging for everything and trying to have it remastered and everything later. So stem mastering, if you're looking to do actual placements with your music in the future, definitely recommend that for you. So let's get to this last one. It's 2023. We're no longer cutting on vinyl. That's not a thing. And yes, there are people who cut on vinyl, so it is especially a thing for them. But realistically, transferring songs on a digital medium is not transferring songs on a vinyl medium. It's literally so much easier to get away with so many things nowadays in your mix that you can make your mix just about anything. You can make it just straight up bass and never care. But let's talk about the honest reason why mastering still really matters today. Now, I'm going to give you guys some visual representation, so kind of hear me out with this because it's going to be really important to understand this. Okay, so what I'm going to use as a visual representation, for those of you who like Pokemon, congrats. I'm going to include Pokemon with this, but check this out. Let's say that you turn in a mix to a mastering engineer and he says, great. It's a yellow card. It's a Pikachu, whatever. It's this old Evolutions Pokemon card. And yeah, it looks like a standard card. It sounds like a standard mix. But, you know, to somebody who's been around for a while, this looks really faded. This actually looks pretty old, but it's not old. This is actually from only like 3 years ago. We look at mixes exactly the same way. And the reason we can is because we know the past, what the cards look like in the past, and we know what they look like currently. So when you actually send your song to a mastering engineer and you wonder, how does your mix stack up and if they can actually help you, a mastering engineer will actually understand if your card looks faded, if it looks and sounds out of date. That is what mastering is all about. It's all about hitting certain standards and making sure that you actually stand up on certain mediums and translate alongside other music that's commercially released today. You don't want your song sounding like it's old unless that's exactly what you're after. At which point, once again, this is why we communicate with our engineers and our mastering engineers and make sure that everybody's on the same page about end goals. This is where a lot of the confusion of mastering engineers changing too much or not doing anything is confusing, because sometimes you don't want them to do anything and sometimes you want them to do something. Now, one thing mastering is never going to be able to do for you, and this is just me being honest, is take this and make it look or sound like this. Like, this is beautiful, it's shiny, it's everything, but it started off that way. We can enhance and manipulate from there. But if it started with this, your mastering engineer is not going to be able to save you. Now, remember, the goal of mastering is just to bring you up to today's standards or communicate what those issues may be and how you can revise them in your mix. But mastering is especially important when you're talking about, you know, making everything seem cohesive. If your song sounds dark and the rest of the mixes in your album sound bright, they need to brighten that one dark song up. They don't actually have to go back to that saying of don't change anything. They might send it back for revisions and saying, hey, this one is significantly darker. If you'd like, I can change it, but I'm sending it back to you to let you know that it does not match the rest. Now, a lot of times they want the mastering engineer to make these minor changes, but if it's a major change, send it back. But mastering is still just as relevant today as it was before, because we want to meet these standards. We want to meet radio standards. If you want to stand out and have that new sound, but you're turning in something that sounds old and filtered and faded, it's not going to stand out. In fact, it's more likely to get skipped. So when considering whether to hire a mastering engineer or not, remember, it's based on your ability to trust those that you hire to give you the right advice and point you in the right direction. If there's nothing needed to be changed, then the mastering engineer won't change anything. In fact, may apply some limiting to help you with loudness standards and everything, but they're typically not going to change anything if nothing needs to be changed. If there's changes needed and they're very minor, a mastering engineer will change them. If it's cohesive projects where it's like tracks 1 through 10 all need to sound the same, then yeah, in order to make things cohesive, they might make a few changes here and there, but they're not supposed to ultimately revolutionize your mix. But mastering, still just as necessary as it was before. That's my summation of everything in these 5. I'm trying to keep things short. Obviously, there's way more layers to this, but you know, honestly, for the sake of YouTube and what we're doing here, I'm not going to dive in that deep with it. If you want to have a conversation, you can always message me, chime off in the comments, chew my head off if you'd like on some of these, because I'm sure somebody didn't like something I said, and I'm sure this helped a lot of people. But definitely let me know in the comments. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, turn the alerts up if you like more content like this. And just so you know, you can actually find me on the Engineers platform for a limited amount of time, doing like 50% off on just about everything that I offer. I just joined their platform just to kind of get things going. So you can get mastering as cheap as $50. You can even get full stem mixing as cheap as $250, and that's not going to last long. So honestly, if you're seeing this a year from now, I'm sorry, it's probably not there anymore. The profile is probably still there, but go check out the current discounts that's going on there. I might do some seasonal stuff in the future, but now is the time to get it for a lot cheaper, because if you book me directly through my website, the prices are not available there. It's only on the Engineers platform. But once again, Thank you for watching the video. Let me know what you guys are thinking for the future. Let me know what kind of content you want to see, but I'll talk to you guys soon.